So you're thinking of going into contracting. Well, it's not an easy decision. You're currently probably in a permanent job right now, and you're thinking, do I need to quit? What do I need to do? Who do I need to speak to? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how you can become a contractor, and specifically how I did it. Now, really and truly, contracting is one of those things that isn't necessarily heavily explained to a lot of people. And so I'm going to try and dissect that with my journey. Now, a contractor is somebody who provides some sort of professional services to an organization, sometimes known as a client. Okay. And so the difference between them and an employee is that they are not directly contracted by the organization. So these different contractors are contracted using umbrella companies, their own limited company, etc., which I'll go into in a bit more detail. Now, essentially, the thing to remember is that a contractor is somebody who is off payroll. In other words, are not directly paid by the client or the organization. So to give you an example, if you're a contractor working for the NHS, the client is the NHS and you are the contractor. And depending on the type of contract that you set up, heavily depends how you get paid, what sort of deductions come out as well. What do I mean by this? Well, there's this whole idea known as IR35. I say it's an idea, but it's legislation in the Finance Act. And effectively, this talks about how you should be taxed and how you're treated as a contractor. So for example, there are two sort of like main tiers. There's inside IR35 and there's outside of IR35. So inside of IR35 essentially means if you were working directly or were directly contracted by the organization or the client, then there are certain tax deductions and contributions that you'd be making, such as employer contributions, national insurance, apprenticeship levy, and there's one other, it'll probably pop up on the screen as well. So that's what differentiates you. And usually for individuals or contractors who are inside IR35, this is not always the case, but there's more of a rhythmic basis in terms of their payment. So what I mean by that is you're more likely going to be paid on a weekly or monthly basis. And again, you can opt in or out of the employment regulations, which basically protects you as a worker under the client that you're working for. So there's all this stuff, and I'll put some information in the links below. As an inside IR35 contractor, you're going to most likely be using an intermediary such as an umbrella company. So to explain that, essentially you are working directly for the umbrella company, but in terms of providing the services, you're providing those services for the client or the organization, such as the NHS or such as, Bank of Scotland or wherever it may be. So it's a very important distinction to make. If you're outside of IR35, then essentially what this is saying is that it's less likely that the sort of services that you'll be carrying out is similar to an individual or an employee that is directly contracted via an organization or a client in this instance. And so the tax system is slightly different. Now, there are higher or better tax advantages being outside of IR35, and usually this is set up with some sort of limited company that you own or someone else owns. Again, there are a bit more complications with this, but again, you can do some more research on that. Now, I want to make this very clear. A person who's very good to speak to is an accountant, okay? Someone who is specialized with helping contractors, because again, that's their role. If you can speak to someone who is FCSA approved, again, I can put down the acronyms below, then you're in a position where not only are you getting a good service, but they have to do things against a certain regulation as well. So always seek a financial advisor or an accountant who is FCSA approved so that, you can get the best advice. Now, I'll get into my journey into a bit, but I just wanted to give you a bit of background. Now, there are 5 sort of like main key roles that you need to think about when you're going into contracting. So there is the contractor. So that is you, the person who will be delivering the works to the client. So number 2, the client. So this is the end organization that you're working for. This could be the NHS, the Bank of Scotland, like I said before, or any sort of like organization that you'd work for. Then you've got the intermediary. So that is such as the umbrella company. So you've got different examples of those, and usually FCSA regulated or approved companies are on a list. It's best to use those rather than use another one. Then you also have the limited company. Okay, so that, again, if you're doing outside of IR35 roles, you're more likely going to be using a limited company. In fact, you probably will be using a limited company. And then there's also the agent. So the agent is the individual who usually finds you the work. You might find their agency on Reed or, something like that. And they work, with the intermediary, so the umbrella company, and or with the client as well on your behalf. And so they all get a cut in some way, shape or form. And I'll probably do some future videos to just explain contracting as a thing. So let's get onto the journey. So effectively back in 2020, I think the end of November or December, I was feeling really low. I was feeling quite anxious. I don't know if I had mild depression, but I was definitely being burnt out. And I thought to myself, there's definitely a conflict in values in the situation that I'm in currently right now. So I needed to remove myself from the situation. And I was actually quite concerned for my health. You can find out more about this in my video where I talk about how I quit. Now, essentially, I went to the GP. They gave me a sick note for 2 weeks and I already had leave for an additional 2 weeks. So this covered me for pretty much the whole of December. And I had a lot of thinking to do. I was like, what am I going to get myself into? Am I going to apply for another job, or is this going to be the same thing again? Is this the lockdown effect? Should I look into consulting / contracting, or should I just focus on my coaching business full time? And so I decided to do a combination between coaching and consulting / contracting. Now, what's the difference between consulting and contracting? Well, usually consultants are referred to individuals who work for a consulting firm such as EY, Deloitte, PwC, all of those different sort of like big 4, 5 companies. But a contractor could be classed as an independent consultant because, again, they're providing services, specialist services or expertise to the end client. So I kind of use them interchangeably at times. If I'm talking about an independent consultant, I'm talking about a contractor. Anyway, let's get back to it. So I thought to myself, I need to research what contracting is about. I made the decision to focus on the contracting route and the coaching route. I kind of had the coaching route in the bag, and that's a progressive thing over time. But the contracting, I could get sorted. So I did some research. I think I checked out contractor.co.uk, had some good information on there explaining IR35 and payment calculators and things to look out for, etc., etc. I spoke to some people who were contractors in the previous place I was at, and I got really friendly with somebody I was working with a project on, and we're great friends now. And she was fundamental to really getting me to understand contracting. So shout out to Katrina out there. Bang, bang. Anyway, so effectively, she explained her journey. She explained exactly how she did it and things to look out for. And I was a bit nervous at first asking because I didn't want to overstep the mark. I mean, at the time we were quite professional in terms of our relationship, but at the same time, we were quite open as well. And we were developing as friends anyway. And so with that in mind, she broke down everything. She even sent out LinkedIn messages, direct messages to 4 different personal recruiters that she knew, as in agents, to broker an introduction. Unfortunately, 3 of them weren't as serious, but 1 was very serious. And so I got a response back. So I'm ever so grateful for that introduction in the first place. So sat down with this agent, really, really nice lady. And she really explained to me how the whole process works in terms of, things to consider. I definitely needed to quit. So if you're thinking about quitting, again, you have to do what you're comfortable with. And this is not a de facto way to do it. This is just how I did it. And she was also talking about, getting an accountant and payments that need to be made, etc., etc. So obviously I'm thinking about the numbers and timescales and practicality. And so she recommended me to an accountant, which I'm using today. And again, they were super, super, super helpful, really helpful. What they did for me was they created an illustration in terms of a hypothetical situation if I was going to get paid X amount per day and what contributions would be taken out. Now, that really helped me because I was like, whoa, this is a bit mad. I mean, it showed me what was being taken out. It also showed me what I'd be making per week / per month. And also the accounting firm also gets their own sort of like contribution. Now, in this instance, the accountant or the accounting firm acts as the intermediary as well as the sort of like, managers over my limited company as well. So I had them set up for 2 things, which are 2 different fees, which I can talk about in a different video. Anyway, so moving on, all these different conversations that I had really solidified in my mind that actually I want to go into contracting. This sounds like a sensible idea for me to do. Even though it felt risky at the time, I didn't really have a solid plan, but I did some research and spoke to people. It was during a lockdown. I was feeling low, but there was an inner feeling to say, Mike, you need to just go for it. So I went for it. So I came back at work the 11th of January and I told my manager, almost copped out, but I told the manager that, I have, learned a lot of things during my experience here, but I think it's time for me to leave in order for me to exercise my need and want to go into contracting. And to give you context, I wanted to do it before. However, this whole sort of like anxious burnout, all of that sort of stuff solidified the feeling of doing it now. And so that's exactly what I did. So I handed in my notice and, I'll give it to her. She was very, very helpful in the fact that she gave me some flex in terms of when I could leave. So in the NHS, I had about 3 months notice period. I know it's crazy, but that's what happens when you're at that level. And so I was in a situation where rather than having a fixed date, it was somewhere in March that I could leave. So really, really grateful for that. And so what happened between, I guess January and March? Well, effectively, I was obviously winding down and handing over my stuff to the appropriate people within my team. But from a contracting standpoint, what I was doing was registering myself on Indeed, on Reed, checking out job, applications and stuff on LinkedIn. I was doing a lot of networking on LinkedIn, by the way. I was speaking to people that I'd kept relationships with anyway, like on and off here and there over time from previous employment. So effectively what I said was, hey, how's it going? Long time. What are you up to these days, etc. And I'll just tell them like I've quit the NHS and I've decided to go into contracting. And so was there an incentive? Yes or no, in a sense that I'm just throwing my sort of net out there. But in the same instance, I'm genuinely seeing how they're doing. And so this becomes an opportune time. And so with those different questions, with those different sort of brokered like communications, they would either say, oh, great stuff. I know someone who got into contracting, speak to this person. Or they'd be like, oh, I'm doing contracting myself. Without any knowledge of me knowing. I know it's on LinkedIn, but not everyone updates their LinkedIn. And would have a conversation. And so this gave me more information in terms of things to think about and tips to think about, etc., etc. And so this happened between January and February. In February, I had another conversation with the same agency that I spoke to, introduced to via my friend, but it was with a different person who was more specific to, I guess, the assumed skills that I had in change management, transformation, implementation, all of those different things, operational delivery, etc., etc. And so they sat down with me, just really tried to assess, what skills I have. Is my CV what it says it is? What sort of roles am I looking for? And so it was good that I did that research or looking for roles on Reed, Indeed, and LinkedIn to give me an idea of what I felt like. And the strategy for that was to just look at the whole market and then start to narrow down. That's always been my strategy. Look at everything and then cut away the things that definitely don't make sense and then go into that. And so what they would do is try to sort of gauge and sense what rate you're looking for. And so how are you supposed to know? You have no idea. This sort of like really, I guess the only way I had an idea of what rate I should go with was from the conversation I had with, my friend who introduced me into the whole contracting world. And so what I've realized now is that based on a role that is similar to what you did before, you'll roughly get paid 2 to 2.5 times that amount per year. Now, obviously there are sort of like risks associated with contracting, such as you could get cut, your notice period could be imminent, you don't get sick pay, etc., etc. But if you're smart with your money, and again, you can watch this video to learn more about that, then you're in a situation where, well, that's a minor because you're going to be making so much more money than you did previously. And so I put down a figure and I basically said, I'm not negotiating below this amount. And I'm hoping to stick to that. I'm still a newbie in this. I'm not an expert. I'm just really sharing my journey on what I've learned so far. And so they went away with that information in February. Through the applications on Reed, etc., etc., I got callbacks and emails for different roles. I got an interview for a role and I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. And I wasn't too mad, if I'm honest with you. But, I mean, getting into that position it can be a bit daunting at times. And what I mean by that is, once they call you or send you an email, literally an interview could be the next day or the day after that. Okay. So you need to be on it. I mean, in this contracting space, it's very entrepreneurial in terms of how you get the sort of like contracts, in terms of how you network, in terms of how you set yourself up, your personal branding. Again, I can talk about this in another video. So I didn't get the role, but a couple of days afterwards, the agency came back to me basically saying that, do you know what? Well, I didn't say, do you know what? I'm just saying, do you know what? But do you know what? We have 3 potential roles for you. Which one would you like? Because the client is very much interested in your CV. And so I looked through them, very brief descriptions for each role. And I chose one that made sense for me, I think. And it did, by the way. And yeah, so what happened was the client saw it. They were happy with my CV. I didn't need to go through a rigorous interview. And Kwame is your uncle. Forget Bob. Kwame is your uncle. So I went through with that. And I started my contract on the 22nd of March, 2020. Now, it was initially a 3-month contract. It was extended for an additional 6 months. So that's 9 months. But lo and behold, I've got a new contract in the same sort of organization as well. So that pretty much is my journey. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else? I mean, the only thing I will say is if you're saving for a mortgage, the best thing to do is to stick with an umbrella company that is FCSA approved for at least 3 to 6 months, so that when you're applying for mortgages via a bank, such as Halifax or whatever it may be, then you're more likely to be approved because it shows consistency. And that is for inside IR35 roles. In addition, the sensible thing to do is to make sure that you have enough savings to actually fall back on just in case. So, I mean, I was a bit risky. I only had a month's worth of savings that I could fall back on in terms of expenses. But I had a wad of savings for a deposit that I was contributing towards, my first time house with my partner as well. And so I didn't want to dip into that. But luckily, everything was pretty smooth. There was no waiting period for me at all. But that's not always going to be the situation necessarily for you who is watching this. So really see what you can plan ahead of time. But it's not always going to work out the same way. The last thing I'll say is that just have a sense of what sort of skills you can actually bring to contracting. So, you need to be highly organized. You need to be resilient. You need to be someone who's quite fluid as well. You need to be someone who's able to sort of work through crazy change. I guess, there are certain skills you need to be good at, whether that's Excel or coding or organization tools like Trello or Asana, whatever it may be, project management tools or qualifications such as MSP, change management, Prince2, Agile. These are all big things that are going to be really useful, especially in this space. And I'd say if you haven't developed some sort of experience, then I don't know if contract is necessarily for you. I may be wrong, but they're definitely looking for a set niche of people. After that, once you get in, you can kind of float about into different things depending on your skill set and what you're looking to seek as well. But if you don't have much experience, then you may be assumed to be at a certain level. Okay, so you normally go into the level that you've come from, if that makes sense. So in the NHS or in the civil service, if you were a grade 7 or grade 6, you'll get grade 6 or 7 roles because they're looking for that sort of assurance. And then from there, you could possibly work up if you can, position your CV in the right way. So really think about that stuff. But remember, the pay's great, okay? Especially if you're on a day rate and you're getting paid weekly and you're good with your money. Like I said, is about 2 to 2.5 times what you would have got in your full-time role. So hopefully this video was good for you. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.